What's going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday, May 12th. Here we go. This is episode 2, week 2. I got my buddy Oliver Catt in the house. This is Call Center Confidence. Wherever you're tuning in, thanks for joining, whether it's LinkedIn Live is our primary place, also on YouTube, also on Facebook. Oliver, great to see you. How you been?
You too. Yeah, no, really good. Thank you. Really good. Had a great week since last week. I'm ready to kind of drive it up a notch. Ready today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited. I'm really enjoying this. The feedback's been great. It's been super fun as people join in. If you're tuning in, please leave comments, say hello, maybe say, hey, where you're coming from, tuning in from, and then any questions, anything you want us to talk about. Our focus today is to kind of continue that leadership conversation, but this is super fun. I mean, I've done a lot of, podcasts. I've done a lot of different things. I know you have as well. But for this show and how niche we are on call center success and building confidence for call center leaders, it's just super fun. I love that, us two call center sales training, coaching nerds can get together and help the community in general. It's just fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think, one of the big things that's come out of this, as you say, with the feedback has been great. And as you say, the niche that's behind it, there's nothing really of massive substance out there that kind of compares to what we're offering. Especially we're giving you free tips, tools, and techniques that you can use in the call center industry globally. And that's one of the great things about this is last week we had people from all over the world kind of tune in live and watch it post live as well. From Asia, UK, US, I think Australia was in there as well. I think It's great that we're helping as many people as possible. And that's what we're here to do. And that's one thing to remember, that these sessions every single week that we bring you are going to be there for you to help you be better at what you do.
Yeah, I love it. I hear you talk and I feel like you should be on infomercials or TV. I don't know, like the home shopping channel here in the US. I was like, man, that was good. I'm excited. Dang. That's all. Wow, that's a very nice water bottle you got there. I love it. I think that's great. And just some general housekeeping. Like I said, this is on LinkedIn. It's on Facebook currently. It's on YouTube. We're working on getting it on as many platforms as we can. It's currently under my feed, so under the Jason Cutter feed. We're working on getting Oliver's feed on there as well so that it can go to his audience. So wherever you found this and tuning in, that's great. We're also a couple of things. We have a LinkedIn event, and we also have a new LinkedIn business page. So if you haven't found it yet, you can just search LinkedIn for Call Center Confidence and find the business page there. That way you can follow that and then get posts and updates, because LinkedIn loves business pages and will always show those notifications. So that way we can kind of get through to everybody without the algorithm getting in the way. So make sure to do that. We're also, Oliver is working on some really cool stuff with email list, landing page, signing up, so we can just build a community around this and really help support each other, really, which is what this is about. I mean, I know you've said this many times, Oliver, that it's about helping this community and then also bringing this community together and just kind of forming this group that we have to support each other, because it's a big community, but it's also a weird island that everyone's on trying to survive and figure it out.
Yeah, no, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more, Jason. I think, for those of you out there watching today, is just to remind you that, well, first of all, if you can hear it, it's raining. above me. But secondly, we are building this community for you. It's going to be available through different formats, different web pages. So many ideas have kind of sprung up between Jason and I since last week's session, whether we talk about websites, whether we talk about podcasts, whether we talk about pages. And we're going to continue to use that. I think for now, the best place to go is to the Call Center Confidence business page on LinkedIn. Eventually, this episode will be live on that page. And most importantly, we'll be hosting all of our previous live or previous hosted materials, such as videos, tools, tips, and techniques that we'll constantly add and allow you to ask questions, and we can answer them as well. And I think that's the most important thing to remember. But today, we are going to jump straight into leadership. Yes, that's exactly what we're going to do. We were there last week. We had a lot of great questions about it, and we're going to continue to kind of drive forward and jump into the leadership section here today. So again, please remember that we are going to be looking at your comments and your feed. So if you do have anything that you want to share, if you've got any questions, if you want any helpful tips and techniques, we will do our best to answer them. I'm not saying we have all of the answers. We have many through our experience and years of kind of in the industry. But again, sometimes we may need to come back to you. So again, please put your questions down. We'll always address them. We'll hit as many points as we can as we go through. And as Jason quite rightly has put up on the bottom, our first topic of today is virtual leadership. Now, we're in a virtual world at the moment, especially on the back end of COVID. And I say back end because fingers crossed, it is disappearing. It is going. Everyone's getting their vaccinations, and soon we'll all be on a plane back to normal. However, since all of that, one of the big things to remember now is that there are a lot of companies out there that have chosen to remain virtual. And it isn't just these companies that can go back to the office. They're asking their teams, do they want to go back? And as much as you can say, yes, I'll go back, or no, I don't want to, we are still going to live in that changing world where we're going to have to manage teams in different locations from their home or other offices because they're not able to travel. And virtual leadership is not being in the same room as these people, not being able to read body language, tone, and things like that. These little subtle things that you could pick up on as a leader have now disappeared, and it is now over a screen. Because right now, for example, you can't see what my hands are doing. Am I twitching? Am I nervous? Am I twiddling my thumbs? You don't know. Right. Am I sat here in shorts? And what am I wearing? That's the other question. But it changes everything. And do you think it gives you a benefit? Do you think it kind of removes some of the element of having that person in front of you? Jason, where do you stand on virtual leadership? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Do you think it's something new? What do you think?
I think it is challenging. I think it exposes weaknesses in corporate culture and then leadership skills. I think that's one of the biggest things I saw when companies went virtual, and companies I had kind of warned and forecast that their company culture, right? Like people bonding, keep people, people leading and how they did it. It was more by in-person, over the shoulder, walking up and down the rows, micromanaging, if you will. Like that's how the metrics were hit versus actual company culture where people are bought into a mission and a vision and core values and everyone is rowing in the right direction. Then you send everyone remote and then you see, how strong that is. So I think that exposed a lot of things, and a lot of companies then realized that and then built a stronger foundation, which will help them, especially if you go back to in person. And I think there was a lot of leaders, again, who were more managers, micromanagers, using carrots and sticks and fear-based incentives, that you go virtual and it's tough because you can't have that same impact and people are kind of removed from it. So I think there was some of that. I also think that virtual can be very successful when you know how to just interact with people and support them and give them what they need and focus on the important stuff instead of, let's say, just pointless, endless meetings or conversations and things like that. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think quite rightly, the way you said that, all of these changes are happening. Some people are comfortable with it. Some people are not comfortable with it. And I think that's one of the challenges that people are going to have to overcome now, because whether you're not comfortable or not, You're in that environment. We all get thrown into the deep end from now. That's how it
Yeah.
works. That's how you learn. I remember being thrown into the deep end with sales training, going, "Oh, I've come from a service background," and having to figure out how to tell people how to sell. And I think the same is right now. I was working with a group of leaders recently who have always had their people in an office in front of them. And I wouldn't say they were micromanagers. They were a great group of leaders, but being thrown into the world where they're at home, and we all have distractions. How do you do a disciplinary or a one-to-one, as being a virtual leader where you got dogs barking in the background or kids running around? It's tough. But the thing is, I think those sounds are the new norm. I was on a call with somebody this morning, and my dogs were barking at somebody outside my house in the garden. And I was like, can you excuse me for 2 minutes? They don't normally go off like this. I say that, and they're probably going to go off in a minute. But we have to accept that there are surroundings. I have this green screen because I'm still moving house and I have boxes piled yay high behind me. Otherwise, you'd see a nice clear background of an office. It does not look like an office behind me, but we have to accept this kind of things. Do people want to show what's really going on in their background, in their lives? And it's not easy. So, what tips do you reckon you could provide, Jason, to somebody who is in a newly virtual environment or, has learned to kind of manage themselves through COVID as a manager, stumbling around and finding their own feet, so to speak, because it may be the first time they've done it. What kind of top tips do you reckon and I know I'm putting you on the spot with this question, that you could throw somebody out there to kind of help them manage in this environment?
Well, I think one of the first things is understanding that A, everybody's always going through something, and then B, everybody is different. And I think those are just leadership principles and empathetic principles anyway, like general things. Again, this is that division, you mentioned it, where leadership versus management. A lot of people used to managing, like I'm the manager, I'm the boss, I'm going to tell you what to do, or else. Leadership is more of a pulling than a pushing. Management to me is pushing. I'm going to push you to do what you need to do. Pulling is I'm going on this journey. I have this vision. I want you to follow me, and here's why. Now, a lot of sales leaders, sales managers, team leads think, well, I'm not the boss, so I don't have the vision, right? It's not my company. Why would they follow me? It's like, but you're a part of that journey. And so I think it's understanding everyone's going through something. Always. Everyone always has something in their life that they're dealing with. It's called life. And then everybody's different. And I think one of the best leadership traits that gets lost in the office, that's super important, virtual or remote, is that everybody's different. So they have their own motivations, they have their own goals, they have their own desires, they have their preferences for how they get, how they want to be appreciated, what that, that love language, that appreciation language is, and what that's like. And so it's about, as a leader, especially in this environment, is whether you have 5 people, 10, 50 people, is getting to know all of them, understanding all of them, and what makes them tick and what they like, and what motivates them the best for them and makes them the happiest, and then serving that up to them at scale. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one point that you raised, I think that everybody really needs to take in is, as you say, that love language. It has to be touched upon. It has to be used. So many people, turn their nose up at it. And I remember the first time I ever heard that terminology, I laughed. And, it can be used in work. It can be used in relationships. It can be used in real life. But people do need to focus on that, because now you are forced to an environment where your tone, how you say something, the words that you physically say can make that much of an impact. That body language element has been taken out of this completely. And that's why you have to focus on how you come across. It's so easy now to take things the wrong way, Quick fact for everybody out there, 7% of the way that we communicate is the actual words that we say. When we send a text message, when we send an email, how many of us have taken that text or that email the wrong way, that Facebook post the wrong way? Reason being is because we're only seeing 7% of the conversation. It's the reason why emojis and smileys and winkies and all of that were put into conversation, because, without that tonality, people can take things the wrong way. And I think that's a great point that you raise. Is there anything else you really want to touch on when it comes to virtual leadership?
Well, 2 things on that. So one is that tone is important. I think one of the best things to do as a leader, and then also to encourage the team as a culture, and just as a group, is to always have the best intentions and read things with the best intentions. So when you get that email, when you get that text, when you get that message, reading it where the sender had the best intentions, and read it from that place, even if they didn't, but read it from that place and then send yours, and then just have your team see it that way. Because what happens is, what you're saying exactly right. I mean, a manager can send out an email and people take it, and then they think it's like this negative thing, and it couldn't be. It could be like a pump up email, but it's taken the wrong way. I mean, I've known people in my own life where I will send like, "Hi, how are you? Hope you're having a great day." And I know they're reading it like, "Hi, how are you? Hope you have a great day." Like it's angry. Like I don't even know how you turn that into angry, but it just is.
Capital letters.
I don't even do the caps. Like, I don't know how this turned into such an angry message, but, having the right intentions. And then that love language comment real quick. So it's interesting because I've always said that the 5 Love Languages is my #1 leadership book. I don't know if I've talked about it last week. I had somebody a few weeks ago in a workshop point out that the same author wrote one for workplaces. So if the thought of the 5 love languages kind of creeps you out in the workplace and you're like, well, that's weird, what does that have to do with it? There's one, it's called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace by Gary Chapman. And I just finished reading that this morning. Great book to kind of bridge that gap into appreciation in the workplace where it's appropriate, leaving out the 5th one, which is the physical touch, which is a little hard, especially virtual. So I think, those are the main things. And I think it's about getting everybody to just feel appreciated and connected and keeping everyone going. And then Michael put this comment in here, this question, is good way for us to keep going with this, is getting new reps profitable in a virtual center with little or to no experience seems longer. Also, do you lose the sales buzz in a sales center? And I know, thank you, Michael McGuire, for that, is, that's one of the hardest things with doing that transition for going out of a call center is the energy. It's the buzz. It's the learning from others. It's the feeding off of others. What do you suggest in being able to replicate that as best as possible?
So for me, I think, you can add many kind of techniques and tactics to kind of do this, because as also, do you lose the sales buzz in a sales center? Yeah, you're not in that environment. I remember growing up in a call center in a sales environment where every time somebody got a sale, it was, a round of applause, clackers going,
ring the bell, all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
exactly. But then, to be fair, I've worked in centers recently where they don't do that every time. It's a sale is a sale. It's just another number on the board. Oh, look, let's chalk it up. There we go. So, I think some of these techniques can be implemented into call centers that are running in a real life scenario as well. And I think it's important to remember that, appreciation is there. Noise needs to be made about big wins, successes. When it comes to making sure that your reps are kind of, as we say, on point, they're involved and they're communicated to at all times. It's regular meetings, it's regular conversations, whether it's over WhatsApp, whether it's over email, Teams, Slack. There are so many tools now that have been created for this environment, some of which were created before we even went completely virtual, that were used in-house. I think it's really important to use those tools to ring praise, ring those bells and shout about the big wins. Even shout about the little wins, because especially when you've got new people coming in, those little wins are what get them to the big wins eventually. Let's say, for example, you want to get somebody to a $100,000 kind of sale. If they make a $5,000 or $10,000, it's still 5-10% of where we need to get them eventually, or, increase their speed to competency. But use these platforms to really communicate it. Incentives in a sales environment go a long way. I've worked with companies that, don't believe in incentives, that don't believe in that kind of commission. I'm like, well, hang on a minute. So you've got sales reps on the phone on a base salary, no commission. Why are they selling for you? It baffled me. They tried to explain it, but it was still baffled me. And I'm sure there are people watching today that are thinking, well, I run a sales center and I don't pay commission. Okay. It's an incentive. That's why people do sales, because they want to earn money. And I think it is about the recognition. That's the type of person a salesperson is. They want that pat on the back. They want that kind of well done and cheers and all of those kind of, things that we take for granted. Some people do, some people don't do. And I think it's important to use those tools to do that. That would be my big win for anybody in this type of environment who wants to manage these teams remotely. But again, don't forget, just because you're face-to-face in some environments or you're in a call center, where some of these companies have chosen to do both, do the same for your guys in-house. Virtual pat on the backs, actual pat on the backs, if you're allowed to. I don't know. There are some companies that don't allow you to touch employees. Hey, look. But it's making sure that you reward and you recognize, star of the quarter, star of the 6, star of the 9 months, star of the year, manager of the year. Manager of the year is a big one. Manager of the quarter is a big one. People forget to reward and recognize the managers, but I could go on about this all day. It's one of those things that really needs to be addressed.
Well, and I think when you talk about those incentives, I think one of the reasons why it's so important and necessary, and incentives be the money, could be the recognition, it could be just awards, it could be, again, going back to the 5 love languages and appreciation, it could be quality time, it could be all kinds of things relative to that person and or the culture of a company. But the reason why I think that's always so necessary at some level in sales versus other departments is to be really successful in sales, you're still losing more times than you're winning, right?
100%.
If you are amazing in sales, you're still being punched in the face 60, 70% of the time. And with that, like, you really want to and need to celebrate those wins, no matter what that looks like, for the victories, because it's rough. Otherwise, you get stuck in the negative stuff. I think there's also some really interesting platforms out there, if people are interested in this, is for gamification, for keeping everyone updated. Normally you would have the TVs, like every call center I've ever run, we have the TVs and we have like the stats and the leaderboard and all kinds of things that happen. I've even run teams where there's different teams in different offices in different states and countries, and then the TVs are synced up. So if one team in another state gets a sale, it'll ring the bell on everyone else's TVs, letting them know that somebody else is winning and they need to catch up. So, but there's gamification platforms that are cloud-based that all of your agents could have on their computers that would then have this leaderboard and scores. So there's ways to do it. The technology is amazing. I think the other thing that Michael asked was about getting new reps profitable. With little no experience seems longer in the virtual environment, and that's 100% true. I mean, when you don't have them able to sit next to a person or a bunch of people and feed off and learn, whether they're in training or they're on the floor, that one is just going to take longer. That ramp up, you have to put a lot more effort into it if you want it to be faster. With virtual training, with mentoring, with having them listen in, it has to be much more coordinated and intentional than just throwing them on the floor and hoping they sponge the right things from the right people.
Yeah, I want to back that up as well. There are a number of different platforms out there. I'm not going to recommend any specific brand or company, but you should definitely look into them. There are a couple of big companies out there that I would use personally. And if you do want to have a personal conversation, reach out, let me know, and I can talk to you more about this, that they offer, increased speed to competency through training, through support. I met with a company recently who offer up to 2 times speed to competency, and they offer a reduction in your actually onboarding through the use of their platform, whether being in a call center environment, whether going in for training and then going virtual. And they're really, really good. They cost a little bit more, but these platforms are built for this reason. It's a SaaS product that's been specifically targeted for post-COVID or virtual teams. So there are companies out there, but like I said, if you want to talk more about that, drop me a message and let me know.
Maybe future sponsor for the show. Who knows? We'll see where this goes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully one of them's on. Hopefully one of them's on today after a conversation I had with them recently. So how you doing? Yeah, there we go.
Who knows? Who knows? Call Center Confidence with Cutter and Catt, sponsored by the fine people at, insert your name here.
Exactly. We'll run that banner next week and just see if anybody wants to apply for it.
There you go.
So yeah, there's that. But I think that kind of brings up a really good point about virtual leadership, and it kind of brings that to a close. Is there are so many tools, techniques, and tips to use, but just remember, if you're in a virtual environment, support your team, praise them, reward and recognize, and do what you can in that environment. And that kind of takes us on to our next point, which I'm going to hand over to Jason for, and that is coaching and feedback, whether closed face-to-face or online through the virtual environment. How do we do it? How do we achieve it? And what are the best ways to do coaching and feedback? Jason, over to you.
Well, I think the big things, and this is a great segue from what you just mentioned, is I see a lot of companies that think that if they just buy the right tools, right, under the sales enablement label in their tech stack, if they buy the right things, that will fix it. That will lead their teams. That will make it better, right? If I just have the newest and greatest platform, and I think there's a balance. You got to know what you're doing. But again, if you're, like me, I'm not very good at golf. You give me some very expensive golf clubs, it's not going to improve my game much, right? So I need the coaching and I need the tools. And I think there's always that blend. And a lot of companies just abdicate. They hope if I get this tool, it's going to be good. The coaching and the feedback is so important because it's tough for the salespeople, as we all know, because they're in it. They don't know what they might be missing, just like any professional. And so providing that to them. And I think really where this starts is having a culture of coaching and feedback where it's a positive, not a negative. Because what happens in a lot of environments, a lot of sales teams, sales coaching and feedback, I'm using air quotes for anyone listening to this later on the podcast, is those are disciplinary, right? They're felt like I'm going into the principal's office and I'm getting talked to and I'm being told what I need to fix. Partially, it's because the expectation hasn't been set properly through the hiring and onboarding process, partially because of how it's handled and then given, and then partially because our human nature is to defend ourselves, right? That ego part of our brain, that primal part of our brain wants to keep us safe. It also, and this is kind of going in deeper here, but that primal part of our brain knows that we're a tribal society. And a long time ago, when you screwed up, the tribe would kick you out. In fact, there's some tribes right now, even in this day and age, you screw up or you're sick, they leave you alone. They leave you behind as they move on and you are left to die on your own. And so our brain doesn't want that. So negative feedback, coaching, constructive feedback is an attack on our ego. And so it makes us, put up our walls and defenses. And so one of the best things you can do as an organization is keep that in mind and set the expectation up front. Hey, in the hiring process and the onboarding, we're going to give coaching feedback. We want you to win. We need you to win. There's no incentive for us to have you lose or for us to beat you down, because as a company, if you're not performing, we're not winning. We want you to win. But you got to set that stage in the beginning, even before you day one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it is important. I would also want to say that it needs to be consistent. And there are so many different rules and regulations, should I say, for coaching and feedback to get it right, to get it wrong. I mean, there's no manual. There's no one out there to say you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. But there are better ways of doing it. What's funny is in the move last week, I actually found from one of my very first call center jobs, and God knows why I still have this, I found my onboarding manual, which had my coaching and feedback and my one-to-ones with my manager actually in there. And I look back at it, I was thinking, God, I was a bad rep. I was bad on the phone. Right?
What was in there? Tell us some secrets. Tell us some dirty stuff.
I'll save some screenshots for next week. All right.
Okay. Sounds good. But post them on the page or on the business page, maybe some screenshots in there. People join the page. You can see
I was trying closing techniques that I shouldn't have been trying without role plays and rehearsals. I think at one point I called a customer an idiot trying to do the idiot close technique without practicing it. So there's a list of things in there that we can talk about. There's some great points in there about what I did well, but they did what we call the classic. And when I call it the classic, so many people can argue that the classic I'm about to mention is dead, it's gone, it shouldn't be used. But there are still people out there that think it is the best way to do that. And that is, it's the feedback sandwich, or the sandwich that people like to call it. And how we give feedback constructively. You start off with positivity, you move into areas of development and end on positivity to drive that person up. I'm still a firm believer, as long as it's done the right way and it segues into areas of development and opportunity. There are so many things that we can do right and we can do wrong, whether we're on the phones, whether we're at frontline, even managers. If you've got managers doing coaching and feedback for managers, Everybody's still learning. Everybody's still trying to find out what they do right. But you've got to remember, and I think, Jason, you touched on this perfectly a moment ago, it's not about negativity. It's not about telling people what they've done wrong. It's telling people how you improve it, how you show areas of opportunity, how do you grow strength and grow better at what you do. And that is the right way to coach. That is the right way to give feedback. I've worked with managers recently that will just sit there and tell people what they've done wrong. And what does that do to a person? That badgers them. It brings them down. And, they always say that, managers is one of the reason why people leave companies. Mm-hmm. I think if you manage incorrectly, if you give the wrong type of feedback, if you bring somebody down and a negative towards them, that's why people do move on. So how do we change that? How do we fix that? How do we give people the tools that they need to improve their coaching and feedback? And we could talk about this for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. And I'm sure coaching and feedback will come around because people have asked for it. People have kind of, said this is the topic we'd like to talk about. But I think it's important to remember, it's about bringing people up. It's about making them feel good about themselves. It's giving them energy, even if what they have done is wrong, if they've given misinformation, if they have told somebody that they should do X instead of Y. We tell them, you told this person this, but this is what you do moving forward. This is how you create opportunities for yourself. What do you think, Jason? What else can you add to that?
I think that's, obviously, we're doing this show together because we believe the same things generally and kind of go in the same direction. I think when we look at the feedback sandwich, if you're giving that to somebody who's got any experience with that, they know that the positive stuff is just fluff and might not even feel that authentic, which makes the negative stuff in the middle of the sandwich even worse because you're like, all right, you're just trying to put lipstick on this pig. Like, okay, it's just, you don't mean the positive stuff because you just want to tell me the negative stuff and not hurt my feelings. But again, I think, the best thing that I've always done when giving that feedback is, hey, I want you to succeed. The company needs you to succeed. I want to give you feedback so you can win and get better, so that you can just get better and better all the time. I think it's also important to ask for permission, even if they work for you. Hey, I want to give some feedback. Are you open to that? Are you okay? So I'm going to give you some feedback because I want you to win. I've always told people too, like, I'm not here to control you or put you down. So if I say anything, it's just to help you win. And I think that's important. And then I think what you said is consistent, because again, where this can seem punitive is when it's inconsistent and it's only coming when the person's not performing well, right? They had a bad week or they had a bad day and all of a sudden they have a coaching session versus always coaching and always giving feedback. And I'll tell you, here's one of the things that I have done forever and shocks a lot of managers when I tell them this, especially now with the companies I work with, is coaching is usually negative. Hey, what happened on that call? Okay, you screwed it up. You didn't get the deal. Let's listen to it. Let's go through it together. Let me give you some tips. Let me tell you what you could do better next time. That's just the classic, right? That's always the easiest thing to do. What I prefer to do when it's available, unless somebody sucks just so bad they're not closing deals, is that when they're closing deals is to go through those calls and those meetings and figure out their formula for success. Because one of the challenges is it could be a million different things for why you didn't close a sale. But if you do close a sale, what did you do? How did that work? And then how do you replicate that positive thing? So I actually enjoy doing the coaching on the positives, which is how did you do that? What did you do? What worked well? What can you do next time that also worked well in that scenario with that type of person, that type of buyer and scenario? Okay, great. Do more of that. And so not just beating them down on the negative. Have you found that to work as well?
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're working with the positive. It flips it completely. And it's a completely different approach. And working with that positive to hone, tweak, and improve upon what's already great is a great technique, because you only ever make a great rep better, a great manager better. And that's fantastic. I really like that. Just touching on a comment here from AJ that's come in. Good, better, best coaching strategy has worked very well in a company with a learning culture. This is always subjective and not a one-size-fits-all go-to. And then following that, it's a trainer's job to help every agent to develop their own style that they are comfortable and effective in. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with those comments, AJ, perfectly. I think you're right. It is about helping them develop their own style. One thing that I'll always do whenever I work with anybody on the phones is I will never, some companies do like scripts. A lot of companies have scripts. I'll never have a script in place from my perspective. I'll always go with the kind of bones of the conversation, and they can add their own meat to that. And that meat is what is making it better, because you tweak it, you change it. Remember, if I give you a script, you're only ever going to sell like me. You're never going to sell like your own personal self. So we give you the high points, we give you the best points, and then you take it from there and you add your own personality and pizzazz to it. That's what I would say.
Interesting. And AJ's comments are perfect. I think that's one of the best things to keep in mind as a coach, as a leader, as a trainer, in any of those positions, is the balance between what works in general in that position to sell whatever you're selling, right? Like, here's the best practices, here's the playbook, here's the process we know works. And then also not trying to make everyone a robot like you and this homogeneous sales culture. Not just talking about it from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, but just also like everyone's personalities, everyone's styles, and everyone's going to sell different. You're going to sell different than I am, right? The next person, AJ, is going to sell different than either of us. And Michael, who was on earlier, same thing. And so not forcing our perspective and sales process and sales styles and our comments. Here's what you should say next time. Here's what I would have said. Give some tips, and then obviously let them. We'll have to make that sales script a topic for another day. You say that, my first reaction is to disagree with you a whole bunch in some ways. So we'll put a pin on that for later. But yeah, I think that's some leadership, some coaching and feedback things is obviously always make it what's their best strengths, what's going to work for them when they say it out of their mouth versus what I would say coming from me and my experience.
Yeah. All right, good. All right. Look, coaching and feedback, we could talk about for forever, as we say. This is a never-ending piece that we're looking for. And while we're midway through the kind of episode, and I know we're kind of touching on this, one thing that I do want to bring up is next week, and I'm not jumping to the end, we're not closing this episode off. We would really like for some of you out there that have your opinions, that have your thoughts on leadership, coaching, feedback, people management. The topics we spoke about last week about leadership pitfalls, transitioning from buddy to boss. We want to get some of you guys on here. Remember, this series, this call center confidence that we're delivering is for you, and we want you to be a part of it. So if you would like to come on next week, or kind of not apply, but be part of the episode, then please let us know so we can bring you up and be part of it, and obviously have conversations with you prior to that, because I think it's important to get your views and not just your comments today, not just your comments last week, but we'd like to hear your thoughts and your feelings on this, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and as we get better at this, and make this a better interactive thing each week, and just keep improving on it. There are ways, because we're using a platform called StreamYard. People might be familiar with it, but literally we can have it so people can also join in. We can bring people up on stage. We can chat. So it doesn't have to be like just a full-time part of the show, but we can make it more interactive and fun. And so please definitely reach out to us, reach out to Oliver and myself. Make sure you're on that business page and interacting with us. Super fun. So let's go from this coaching and feedback idea to the people management. So dealing with the people, that's another, probably a 12-hour session of dealing with people, because that's
they're just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, each one of these is just like just the tip of this iceberg we keep touching. When you think of people management, what does that mean for you, and how does that fit into this leadership discussion this week?
For me, people management is about doing it the right way as a leader. I think, it should be people leadership rather than people management. I mean, you manage people. A manager, as we all know, is monitoring the ins and outs, the clock ins, the clock outs. Did you do the right thing at the right time? But the people leader piece. I mean, people management is just somebody watching everything that goes on and making sure that everybody is where they need to be. But how do you lead those people? How do you inspire and instill motivation in these people? And again, it's kind of touching on, whether we do it face-to-face in a contact center environment or whether it's virtual, because we do have to deal with both in that environment. And we have to manage people the right way. And one thing I want to add to that is it's not one size fits all. And I think that's one of the approaches that a lot of new managers will always, or leaders, should I say, will step into, is the fact that they feel that, it is a one-stick approach. I can just go down this road. This is how I'm going to lead. This is how I'm going to manage. But that's not always right, because everybody responds differently. Jason, you'd respond differently to feedback that I would get. And we all do that because we have, different characteristics, different personalities as to who we are. So we have to make sure that we are constantly learning. And I always live by the mantra, kind of like always be learning. It's always be watching your team as well. Understand what makes them tick. Understand how they work. Because when you do pull them off for whether it's coaching, feedback, one-to-ones, disciplinaries, pat on the backs, people are going to respond differently. And I think for me, it's having a unique approach to every single member of your team. What do you think?
I love it. I mean, I think that's kind of the theme of what we talked about last week. I know for me, and then some stuff that we talked about earlier so far today, is that treating everyone different. That's the basis of that 5 love languages, the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace kind of mantra. And I think one of the challenges is that we are humans. And again, I keep going back to this, but it's so important because it's what's underlying in our behaviors and activities all the time, is that we have this primal part of our brain that is only focused on us and our survival. And what happens is it makes us, if we're not careful, we all, myself included, we see the world through our own lens, and we just assume that everyone else sees the same thing when we see the thing, right? And they feel the same way about the world. And then when somebody expresses a different interest, right? It's like, wait, how is everybody not a fan of this one sports team? Wait, you don't like this sports team? Oh, you're wrong and I'm right because I feel like this sports team is the best, right? Just using that example. And so what happens is that's just a human nature. If you're not careful, then you're in sales and then you become a leader, a manager, a team lead, a supervisor, and you just assume that everybody wants to be motivated, is excited, comes to work, will work the same hard, level of effort that you did, and you just treat everyone the same, right? If you liked money, you're just going to give everyone money, right? If you liked working hard, you're just going to assume everyone's going to want to work hard, and then when they don't, you're at a loss because you just don't get it. And so I think that first part is not being, not looking at everything from your own lens. And I think the best thing you said, always be learning, always be growing, always be like observing. I think for me, and my mantra's been for a while, and I've used this on LinkedIn for a while, is the ABCs. Everyone's familiar with the ABCs, right? Of sales. For me, and this is for sales and leadership, instead of always be closing, it's always be curious. Because if you're always curious, and if you're always asking questions internally or externally in sales and in leadership, then it's about understanding the other person or the process. And when you're doing that, and you do that from a place of empathy of like, I want to get to know you. Now I want to know how I can help you and be a servant leader in sales or in leadership, then it breaks that pattern of kind of the solo lens.
One thing I really want to touch on there is the fact that you just kind of brought up is being a servant leader. There are so many different ways of terminology of what a servant leader is, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But one thing I will say is when it comes to that, and the reason why this is fresh in my mind is there are so many people that use that terminology, but I have no idea what it means. And I think it's important that if you are, talking about serving your team and being there for your team and things like that, which is essentially what that is in that leadership style. Does it work? Does it always work? And there are so many different variants of that style of leadership for me. You have to bring kind of all elements to the table. You may be more one than the other, but I think it's very important when you are dealing with your team, when you are being there for your team, that you kind of mix and match those. And I think that's a great point that you bring up, Jason. Don't just stick to one. It's a mixture. And as you say, always be curious about those leadership styles. Because I think it's important to add a mix into the mix, should I say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what's interesting, and I always say that it's interesting because it is when you're bringing up this stuff, is that there's servant leadership and leadership, and again, people use that, and I think where it can go sideways is when people are servant managers. The difference being leadership, again, is about pulling people on a journey towards a vision that's going to help everybody in some way people want to be a part of. When you're doing that, then everyone's on this journey and then you're supporting them as everyone's moving towards that finish line. Managers are trying to push people into results and get those results they need. Servant managers are basically like trying to help everybody while also pushing them, but then also just like it ends up being either like they're trying to be in buddy mode all the time. And if you like me and if I'm your friend as your manager, then maybe you'll work hard, or they just become doormats because they're just giving and it becomes a lose-win from a company perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's great points. And kind of a good point to kind of wrap that piece up, because like I say, it's a topic we could speak about for a long time. And there are definitely some points there that I know will come up in conversations as we move on. And also one thing I do want to add as well, and I've seen comments come through recently, especially through my own LinkedIn. I know we talk about this being for call center with confidence, but when we're talking about leadership and we're talking about all these other traits, there are people that want to tune in that aren't necessarily in the call center for some of these key skills, then please join us. But remember, this is call center with confidence, but we are going to be covering everything. And when we talk about that leadership and kind of, just looking at the time before we kind of wrap up, there are more topics that we really want to talk about. And kind of finish on really today is the conflict resolution piece. And when you are in that leadership style, when you are dealing with somebody, you are people managing them and you are being a leader from them, it is also important to remember that conflict can arise very, very quickly within the team if you don't get it right. Now, we're not going to go into detail about this today because we've only got a few minutes left before we have to close out here. But I just want to add that if you get leadership styles wrong, if you people manage wrong, and remember, I'm not saying wrong is probably the wrong word to use, but should I say you don't approach it the right way
in ways that aren't getting you the results that you want, right? They're not the positive results for the organization.
Exactly. You've got to remember that conflict can arise very, very quickly. And from my side, and I don't know about yours, Jason, it's very important to nip it in the bud as quickly as you can, because it can cause resentment, it can run throughout the team, and it can spread like wildfire. What are your thoughts on that one, Jason?
Well, and I think it's interesting because AJ had put a comment while we were talking about the last topic about sincerity traveling through all barriers, either physical, digital, etc. And I think it kind of plays into that. I think, again, if your intentions are good and your heart's in the right place as a leader, then when you have conflict and things pop up, then it's about dealing with it obviously quickly, open, honest communication, talking through it. I mean, I'll say for myself, my default mode is to not get into the conflict or deal with it. And I think there's a couple of things. I mean, there's always the surface where there's the conflict that's actually happening. And then there's the underlying, which a lot of organizations don't deal with, which is what's the root cause of that, right? If you have an apple tree and the apples are rotten, you don't blame the apples, right? Like you're going to look at what's the cause of this, what's causing it. And the conflict is usually coming from something. And, it's either a mismatch, hiring the wrong people. We got the manager, like you said, most people leave organizations because of their managers and they're not happy with that. And so what's triggering that? We're setting the wrong expectation. Also, and I forget which book this was that I read a few years ago, but it said that a lot of conflict and a lot of drama that happens in teams, all teams, not just sales teams, all teams, usually happens when everybody is bored or there's not enough work going on, or there's not enough performance, right? Everyone has too much time to hang out and be disgruntled, versus when everything is busy and people are doing what they need to be doing, then they're just going. So some different things to look at which might be causing the conflict. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the time is a very big factor. Because as you said, if people have got too time on their hands, they can focus on all the things that don't matter rather than a well-oiled machine that's running efficiently where, you just go from one thing to the next without even thinking about it. And, it can be as simple as somebody making a comment to somebody else and that kind of flipping through and, being taken the wrong way. And that boils back to a point that you brought up earlier, Jason. It's about communication. Communication in this environment is key. If you don't communicate effectively, if you don't communicate efficiently, then it can destroy all barriers very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to conflict, when it comes to the things that kind of lead to conflict, it's usually when people take things personal, right? I'm just thinking even in a call center office environment, people who get upset and hold a grudge because they passed somebody in the hall who didn't say hi to them. And then now they're upset. They think like that person doesn't like me. And now, just these little things, right? We've all had those experiences, which will cause some conflict and some drama. It's like, well, now I don't like this person and, this issue. And this goes back to what I said earlier, is that everybody's going through something. So when you come at it from empathetic and you have a team that realizes that with positive intentions, maybe that person just got a bad phone call. Maybe something's not going well for them and it's not personal. And so conflict resolution is about, okay, what are people going through, not taking it personal, and then talking about it and viewing it from an empathetic leadership place, again, as quickly as possible.
Yes. Great. Well, like I said, there's a lot more we can talk about this, but we are taking up everybody's lunch hour, breakfast hour, coffee hour, or evening if we're in the UK and we're listening. But don't forget, remember, you can pick this up post live and of course on the podcast as well, and effectively when we are going to be putting it on our platform, our company page. Look, some interesting points that we've all picked up on here, and I think it's really, really good, and so many conversational points. If you do want to talk about any of these specifically or any other areas, then please just drop us a message, go on the page or go in the chat. You've got Jason's information there at the bottom of the screen with his email address, his website, and his LinkedIn page, and mine will come up in just a few moments time. But don't forget, you can join us every single week, and I know there is so much to talk about. There's so many comments and so many messages that we've had that we want to kind of cram in. Maybe we kind of tone it back a bit and focus more detail on specific areas. But again, look, this is episode number 2. We're only going to grow with this. And remember, we're here to make you a call center hero. So whether you are somebody on the phones, whether you're a frontline rep, a early supervisor, through to a call center manager, director, C-suite, wherever you are, if you are in the call center industry, we're going to be talking about all topics that are relevant to you every single day that you are in operation, whether you're in a building or whether you are virtual. Don't you agree?
I do. I think it's going to be great. I'm super excited for all the stuff we have to cover. And like you said, anyone listening, watching, put your comments in, send us a message, topic ideas. We have a bunch of ideas that we've collected and are always collecting from our clients and things that we are seeing out there in the world. But if you have something you're dealing with, please mention it. We'll talk about it on the show. We can talk about it in between the show. Again, we're just here to help this community and grow. Love the ideas, the input, the feedback. It's not just our show, but it's everybody's show, this community. Again, it's a big community, but then it's also a small community. And it's also a community, which is interesting. The more I talk to people about it this week, is it's a community that's generally seen as the bad guy by outside people, right? Inside, it's providing jobs, it's providing services, it's helping customers, clients, revenue, all kinds of things. To the rest of the world who isn't familiar with call centers, the few call centers out there that do things in bad ways, give everyone a bad name in this industry. And so, yeah, everything we can do to help improve that, lift that up, support everyone in winning and shifting that, that's why we're here. So
absolutely,
that's it for this.
And also just one final thing to remind, 10 years ago, people were like, oh, you work in a call center. Call centers now are the factories of our time. Everybody's worked in a call center. Everyone's been there. So, whether you're fretting or worrying that you're in a job, look, we're here to help. We're here to do the best we can. So thank you very much for tuning in. And don't forget, if you want to be part of our episode next week, we are looking for leaders. We are looking for managers to come on, share their thoughts on everything we've spoken about, whether it's conflict resolution, people management, leadership skills, feedback, coaching, you name it. please get in touch, as we want your feedback and we want you on the show. So thank you.
Sounds good. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Oliver.
Thank you.